Step right into another episode of We Read It One Night, the podcast where two sisters take you on a wild ride towards sexy romance land. Today, we're chatting about The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley and looking at autism in historical times. Allison makes a compelling case for why autistic people are actually fairies. Rachel teaches you how to get away with murder in the Victorian era, but only if you're a woman. And we learn way more than we ever thought we would about Bing bowls. Enjoy the show! I started watching the Abercrombie and Fitch documentary.
It's a documentary?
Yes, about Abercrombie and Fitch.
Seems like it'd be traumatizing.
It was. I got like 15 minutes in and I was like, wow, I feel like even though I'm not wearing low-rise jeans, I am. It felt like it made me feel like I was wearing low-rise jeans.
I do though. Yeah, I like their like shirts because their shirts were always like long and like fitted, but like very stretchy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like the ideal shirt. I feel like.
No,
like,
I definitely listen.
yeah.
Abercrombie and Fitch was stupid. I never bought jeans from there because I don't think they ever fit me because they were made for people that didn't have hips. But the shirts were good.
Yeah.
I had quite a, and they were like good quality. You know, like they
Yeah.
were expensive, but they actually did last a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Like the one,
You know?
like that shirt that I still have. What, like
I am
15 years
disappointed
later?
though, because the documentary was talking about, it was like mentioning, and I know this was a thing about how there was always like, they always had the shirtless men outside the stores. Like they would just have models like stand like at the entrance.
Definitely
And I
wasn't
don't
just
think
men.
that Abercrombie and Fitch ever did that.
Oh yeah, they did. I mean, it wasn't just men. It was just like they're hot. I don't know if they were shirtless, but they're hot employees.
No, but it was like
specifically
shirtless, like having shirtless men stand at like live versions of their bags.
Interesting.
Like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's on the bags.
And I was like, I know that's an Abercrombie and Fitch thing, but our Abercrombie and Fitch never did that, and I'm frankly disappointed that we didn't get the full Abercrombie and Fitch experience. Also, did you know Abercrombie and Fitch was like around since like the 19th century, and they were like a sports store?
Yeah, I did know that. Well, that's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say is maybe they used to do the shirtless thing more in like the 90s or like earlier. You know, like maybe they stopped by the time we would have been like aware of it.
No, it was like 2000s.
I didn't set foot in a mall until I was like 10. I remember I was in 4th grade.
It was the 2000s.
And I went to the mall for the first time. So but that would have been like 2004.
They were
the
still
first
in their
time.
height. Sure, but I'm saying Abercrombie and Fitch was still at its height when we were.
I know. I'm just saying maybe it was something they stopped at some point.
I think our mall was just like a bunch of prudes.
We did get that speech in middle school about yoga pants.
Yeah, they did try to
have like a school-wide assembly to like talk about the evils of yoga pants. My, how the turntables.
Thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember like people being like, oh, you can't wear leggings like unless your shirt is long enough to cover your butt.
Yeah.
But like the shirts in question would be like the aforementioned Abercrombie and Fitch shirts, which were also like skin tight. So it's like, what are you achieving exactly? Yeah, like you have a second layer of fabric, but like Yeah.
Well, it's so that you can't see your butt nipples when they get hard on cold winter days.
Of course. Yeah. That's a disturbing picture. Can you imagine having to sit? I guess if everyone had those, well, no, how would it work? I was gonna say if everyone had those, chairs would just have like cutouts.
If you have more than 2 children, so like if you have twins, fine, you only need the 2 nipples. But if you have like triplets or more, your body's like, well, we have to make enough nipples for this.
Do you not know about this?
And so you get butt nipples.
No. First of all, multiple nipples. Like, you know, Chandler and Friends was always getting roasted. Multiple nipples are extremely common.
Harry Styles has a 3rd nipple.
Right. They're extremely common. And a lot of times you won't even know, like for women at least, or men and women, like you won't even know you have it. Like you could just be like, look like a mole. Like there's like different stages of development. But for women, like sometimes when you have kids, they'll start lactating. So that's how you know it's a nipple. But the most common place to have it, unsurprisingly, is like, think about it. Think about other mammals where their nipples. It's basically from where our boobs are down to like their pelvis area. You know what I mean? Like belly button. So there's like I forget what it's called, but it's like a nipple strip, kind of like a landing strip that like straight down your body, like goes straight down your chest down. And that's where it's most common to get it. Like along, it's called like the duct, the mammary duct, like strip or something.
Oh yeah, the mammary glands.
But I've heard of people getting them like underneath their armpit and stuff and like all this other random things. So I think it can really be anywhere. Yeah.
The chances of getting a third nipple on your butt are low, but never zero.
Never zero. You never know. It could be like one of those twin situations, where you like absorb
You
parts of
ate your twin.
Yeah. Speaking of other things that were nipped in the bud,
What?
the Lost City love triangle.
What the that was the worst transition I've ever experienced in my entire I wanted to talk about the Lost City, but that was wow. I just feel like I got crashed into by a car on Grand Theft Auto or
I
something.
just looked down at my notes and that's the wording I use. It felt appropriate.
Okay, anyway, yeah, we saw the Lost City last night and it was delightful. Highly
Very
recommend.
good. Lots of laughs, lots of laugh out loud laughs from the entire audience, which I
Yeah,
feel
not just us being weird.
Yeah. It was very funny, and if you don't know, it's a comedy romance adventure.
Sandra Bullock is a romance novelist who gets kidnapped by Daniel Radcliffe.
But basically, what I'm getting at is that the love interest is Channing Tatum, but he hires briefly Brad Pitt to come help rescue Sandra Bullock. And Brad Pitt is this military, ex-military, rescue man. He's super hot. And so when they rescue them, Sandra Bullock is into him, and Channing Tatum is oh, why are you stealing my lines? I'm supposed to rescue her, whatever. And she's into him. And I was it's gonna be a love triangle. But not 5 seconds after I thought that,
Spoiler.
Brad Pitt gets shot in the brain. He's dead immediately. They just immediately flatten that, nip that in the bud. And you know what? Bridgerton writers should have taken notes on that one, honestly, because
it's not Kill Edwina.
Oh my God.
What book are we doing today?
The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie. I have no idea.
Jennifer Ashley.
Well,
actually, now I'm questioning that. I'm 90% sure that is. Yeah, Jennifer Ashley.
The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie opens up. So this is the second time I read this, but the first time I just remember feeling
wait. Just first of all, before we talk about the plot, I just want to talk about the absolutely amazing titties on the cover of the audiobook. Truly just spectacular. Please, if I remember, I'll post it on our Instagram story or something, but truly immaculate. This audiobook cover, it's just titties. In a corset with pearl, decadent pearls. It's the most, just a close up. It's really just insane. I don't know who took the picture and I chose it for the audiobook, but it was just every time I opened the library app, I was wow.
A+.
This is amazing.
Okay.
Anyway.
So this book was the same kind of random feeling of as in Marrying Winterborn, how it opens up and I'm I feel I'm missing a lot of background here. And in Marrying Winterborn, I actually was, because you told me I didn't need to read the first book, but I definitely did. Here, it's just this is the first book, but it just feels very much you're getting you hear about Beth for the first time, secondhand, and you're who is this woman? And you hear about all this, you get thrown a lot of random information about her previous life that I don't know, it just seems very not in the middle of the action, but in the middle of the characterization, if that makes sense. Which is okay, it's fine afterwards, but I don't know, it was a little off-putting to me the first time, but I'm glad I pushed past it.
This seems like a you problem. Anyway, in the first scene, as we're hearing about Beth, because we have Ian. Ian is on the autism spectrum. That's what his quote unquote madness is. He grew up, he is the youngest son of a duke, and his oldest brother is now the duke. And he grew up, basically spent almost his entire childhood / teenage years in an insane asylum, which this takes place in the Victorian era. So you can just try to imagine about how absolutely shit that was. He was rescued. His older brother, once he became the duke, was gotta get you out of there. So now he just hangs around and buys ancient Ming bowls.
Yep.
And we hear about him because he's buying a bowl from this guy named Mather, who's a dick, and marrying Mrs. Beth Ackerley because she's rich. And Ian is I'm gonna fuck with this guy, so I'm gonna buy this bowl, and then I'm gonna go break up his engagement because I can. And he goes to the opera to meet Beth and is obsessed with her from minute one. Literally looks at her and he's yep, we're gonna get married. And then that's his one track mind for the rest of the book.
Yep. That's pretty much it.
No opinions. Nobody else gets to have a say. He's like, Beth and I are gonna get married. He's like, listen, I just want to fuck her, but like she's like a respectable lady. So like I can't just like fuck her. Like I have to marry her too. And also like I just really like being around her all the time and holding her hand, which he does when they meet in the opera.
Okay, so yeah, so he meets her and they're having this whole conversation with her fiance Mathers there the whole time. And then you realize pages later, she'll be like, and he's still holding my hand. Like it feels so nice around my hand. And I'm like, it's been 20 minutes. And Mathers there the whole time. He shook her hand and he never let go. They're just like sitting at like they sit, they stand. He never lets go of her hand, which is just wild. And basically, he came to the opera with a note. And he was like, oh, I was only going to give you this note if I like thought you were worthy of saving, which like, all right, kind of a dick movie. But like, whatever. He gives her a note and it's basically like tells her about how shitty Mather, her fiance, is. But the entire thing is just kink shaming. Like Mather basically he's a sub and he likes to hire women to like, you know,
be doms,
be doms, basically. Yeah. And it's shitty because like he has like a whole house of them and like Beth obviously doesn't know. So he would be like cheating on her. And she's like, yeah, I've seen him like looking at me like he's getting away with something. So like he doesn't deserve to marry Beth. Like that part is shitty. But we later find out that the current Duke, Hart, Ian's older brother, basically has the same shit going just without the kink. Like, you know, I would call it
he's
kink,
a dom.
but like, yeah.
Hart is a dom, whereas Mathers is a sub.
Exactly. And no one is like basically like people keep asking, like she keeps asking Ian, like, how do you know about this about Mather? And he's like, oh, well, he told it to my brother because he thought it would impress him. And I'm like, yeah, well, no shit, he thought it would impress him because it's the same shit he does. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he be like, oh, we have similar hobbies? Let me like.
Yeah. We got some kink shaming, also some like sexism because I think the thing is because they're like, oh, he likes to relive his schoolboy days.
Like,
you know what I mean? So it's like he likes to be a little boy. He likes to be weak like a woman. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of sexism in there. I'm like, listen, Mathers is a weenie and like definitely just a dick in general, but don't kink shame, guys. Men are allowed to be subs. There's no shame in that.
And honestly, it seems like Hart has just overall caused a lot more damage through his kinks. So, like, if anyone deserves to be shamed in any capacity, it's Hart.
Well, to be fair, Hart is, I mean, he's not kink shamed, but he is. I mean, he's kind of kink shamed. Like, Ian is like, at one point, I mean, later on, we can talk about this later, but Ian at one point, while he's calling out Hart for, like, in general stuff, he does kind of, like, he's like, yeah, anyway. So he's holding her hand the entire fucking time. And he gives her a note. She's like, oh my God, why would you tell me this? And he's like, because I have a really loyal valet who investigates shit for me. And because I don't like Mathers and I think he's a weenie. And then he's like, but you could marry me. And she's like, are you insane? And he's like, yes. Would you like to marry me? Anyway. Yes, and also, I just want to say, so she's a widow, right? She's like Mrs. Beth Ackerley, and her whole sitch, she grew up, her dad was like a con artist pretending to be like a French viscount. So like you already know he's a shitty dude because he's pretending to be French. And then he died and like her and her mom were in like bad shit, and then her mom died and then she was alone, and then like she was like very, very poor, and then she like married this pastor, what's his title? She married the religious man of the poor part of London.
Whatever Mr. Collins is.
A rector?
A parson?
I don't know.
They use all the names
Church
in
of
the
England.
Remember?
She married a low-level Church of England guy, and they were happy, and then he died. And then she became the companion to Mrs. Barrington. Important. Remember Mrs. Barrington. Despite being dead, her. Mrs. Barrington is possibly the third most prominent character in this entire book. And then Mrs. Barrington died and left her all of her money. So like now Beth is like this like heiress. But she had, my point is I want to say is like I like a widow who has had like a good first marriage. Like she like loved her husband, like he was very sexual, like sex positive, like you know, he gave her orgasms. Like I think a lot of times people get really tired of widow romances, and a lot of it has to do because you're just like constantly reminded of like how shitty her first husband was. And yeah, I like that she was like nah, like my first marriage was good and my second marriage is also going to be good, so like whatevs.
But she says no because she's like, why would I marry this person? And like, honestly, Beth this whole time seems just like very willing to give away her like massive fortune. Like she's, I don't know, she's like finally financially, independent, but she's like seems to have no heed for that. Obviously she's gonna end up marrying Ian, but whatever.
She's like,
So she
whatever.
puts us off to Paris instead.
Wait. We got some stuff first. First of all, Beth is like, I'm not dumb when she's talking about Mathers. She's like, I know most people want to marry me, like, because I'm rich. Like, I know I don't have many other charms. And Ian is like, shut the fuck up. You are literally flawless in every fucking way. Also, and I say again, marry me. Then, yeah, he's like, don't worry, I can't love you though. This is important. He's like, I don't know what love is. I do not feel love at all. I will never love you. Don't worry. So I don't expect you to love me. This is important, my friends. Ian, for some, thinks he does not know how to love. He's like, I don't know what that is, and I do not care to know. And then Beth breaks up with Mathers, and then she goes to Paris.
Yes. She goes to Paris to like become an artist, even though she has no idea how to draw, but whatever. It's just like
she's living her hot girl summer.
Yeah,
She's like,
exactly.
I'm rich. Let me know what the fuck I want.
And I'm gonna. So when do we get the Fellers scene?
So, okay. No. So Beth is like, I'm going to go to Paris. And we're like, okay, Beth's going to go have fun in Paris. And then we get a little side clip of Lloyd Fellows, who's a Scotland Yard inspector with a stupid name. And Mathers is like, hey, remember that sex worker that got stabbed in some poor part of London the other day? Well, guess what? I was following Ian Mackenzie. No reason. Don't ask me why. Not important why I was following him. It wasn't at all because I was trying to get revenge for him, like losing me my like rich girlfriend. And I saw him go into the house of that sex worker who got stabbed. So like, And Fellows is like, well, as a matter of fact, I've spent the last 5 years trying to like send all the Mackenzies to jail. And for some reason, I am obsessed with them. So this is perfect.
I love the quote. It's like, as he's like telling him, it's like Fellers tried to conceal his impatience. He knew Lord Ian had gone to Paris because he made it his business to know exactly where Lord Ian was at all times.
He's so, and we don't find out until the very, very end why he's so obsessed with him. So you just spend the whole book being like, this man, like, why
needs to get a life?
Want to like against because he's constantly like, oh, they're like rich and they're aristocrats and they always like think that they can just throw their weight around, and like because so we find out that like they were involved in like another murder of a sex worker. They were like connected to it in some way, like 5 years ago, and he like was like ready to pin it on them, and then his superiors were like, don't talk to the Mackenzies, like you're literally not allowed to talk to any of them like ever, or you're gonna be fired. So he's like extra pissed because he's like, oh, they're just throwing their weight around. But it's not even like a class, like he just like hates all the aristocracy. It's just specifically these four men.
Yeah.
These four brothers.
I mean, I would say he hates their dad. He hates their dad too.
Yeah, but their dad's dead, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. There's
he's just determined, like, not just to like get them, like to literally like get them hung. Like he's like, I want them dead, and you're like, bro, Lloyd.
Yeah.
let's simmer down for a little bit. So anyway, he is on the trail again, and he's like, I'm gonna go to Paris, and technically I don't have jurisdiction there, so like technically I'm not breaking any rules by harassing them in Paris.
Yeah. He's like, I took some vacation time and just popped over to Paris.
Yeah.
So, all right. So cut to Beth painting, and this man who looks very much like Ian waltzes up to her and starts like condescendingly like telling her how to draw. Like he's like, oh, you're holding the pencil wrong, which like I get we're supposed to think like it's Mac. It's Ian's brother Mac, who is like an artist. Think Benedict Bridgerton from the show. That's like who I'm picturing.
Should we say all of the Mackenzie brothers?
Oh, sure.
So Hart is the oldest. He's the current Duke. The second oldest is Cameron. He is also a widower because his wife tried to like kill their infant son and then tried to kill him and then eventually just stabbed herself. And he has a younger son. He has a son called Daniel. And then the third brother is Mac Mackenzie, and he is separated, like legally separated, but still technically married to his wife Lady Isabella, who like they separated like 3 years ago. And the reason like Mac and Isabella are just like constantly stalking each other in Paris and then being like, no, I don't want to talk to them ever. Like there's a lot of setup because their book is next. There's a lot of setup for their book. And then the youngest is Ian.
Yeah. And so Mac comes up to Beth and he's like giving her unsolicited drawing lessons. And then he's like, come over to my house and I'll give you drawing lessons tomorrow or like, you know, something. And then he leaves. And who replaces him but this like hot lady. But Isabella is like, she's like, I want to warn you against Mac. Like he doesn't have a heart. He doesn't care, whatever. And Beth's like, oh, hold on. Like, you do not have to worry about me. You do not have to worry about me. Cause I don't know. Like I'm only here for drawing lessons. Mac only wanted to talk to me because he knew that I knew Ian, basically.
Yeah.
And so then Isabella is like, oh, ho, ho, like I spy a matchmaking opportunity. And she's like, Beth, you have to come live with me, like randomly. So Beth and her maid, Katie, who like just totally disappears. Like, well, not really.
She's like there in the background throughout.
They go live with Isabella and then cue like just random scenes of like Ian stalking Beth and like
Ian's talking to Mac and Mac is like, yeah, I'm gonna give her drawing lessons, and Ian is like, well, I could very easily arrange to be in the room during Beth's drawing lessons. And I'm just like imagining her like him like in the shadows because he specifically like he like implies like he's like, so I can smell her or something, and I'm just imagining him like in the shadows like hiding behind draperies like while Beth's
that's exactly
like,
how it's described. Beth walks in and it's like Ian stepped out from the shadows.
We pop on over to Beth comes downstairs and Ian is playing the fucking piano in Isabella's drawing room. And she's like, hello? And he's like, hey. And then they play Gilbert and Sullivan, like the Pirates of the Penzance. And it was just like very bizarre to me. Like I know that's historically accurate. This takes place in like, I don't know, the 1880s or something. But it's just like very bizarre to me to like think about how Gilbert and Sullivan were like writing musicals in like the 1880s. I don't know. That just seems like way too early for that to have happened, even though like that's when it did. Like I don't know, I imagine musicals being invented in like the 1920s. Like I know this is not true, but like I just don't imagine them happening before then.
When was My Fair Lady written?
Like the 1940s, 30s, 40s, 20. Yeah.
Really?
I don't know, Rachel. My Fair Lady is an abomination. For those of you that don't know, My Fair Lady is based on the George Bernard Shaw play Pygmalion. Pygmalion very, very significantly does not end with like, I don't know, the two main characters, the like Eliza Doolittle and whatever the fucking dickhead doctor's name is. Like it very specifically like it's like makes fun of the idea of them like being in a happy romantic relationship at the end. It's like that's literally absurd. Like this guy is a total dick and she's like way too good for him. And then My Fair Lady came along and was like, hey, Bernard Shaw, fuck you. We're going to make this a fucking romance. And you know what? I, as someone who thinks that everything could have more romance, this is one of the few situations where I'm like, absolutely fucking not. No, it's My Fair Lady is an abomination. I hate that musical so much.
Okay.
Anyway.
Fair enough. I have never, I don't think, sat through My Fair Lady or seen Pygmalion.
I haven't sat through it either, but I just
I did watch it
George Bernard Shaw, and I know that he is a very grumpy Irishman who was like very pissed off when people were trying to like when people saw Pygmalion and were trying to be like, oh yeah, they end up together, right? And he was like, you guys are idiots, fools.
Okay, so they play it, and then Isabella comes down, and she's like, why are you playing pirates so loud? Whatever. All right.
Yeah, so they make out a little bit. And then we have like they make an arrangement, like a little sex arrangement. They're like, we're going to fuck. We're going to be lovers. She also like talks about her bustle and how like hard it is to move in her bustle. And like, once again, as I stated in Marrying Winterbourne, allow me to emphasize how much bustles suck and how ugly they are and how stupid they are.
And we get a little bit of like corset positivity in the beginning. Like I can't remember what exactly it was, but they're just talking about how like it's nicely structured and like, I don't know, like comfy or something.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh yeah, like this is great. And then second half of the book, just like right after like corset slander.
No, I was really but a question for you. I forget whether this is like it's specifically in this scene. Oh no, she's like, wow, my nips are super hard because I'm turned on, right? And a lot of times in historicals, like these, like you can always see for some, like somehow, like you can always see the girl's nips like through her like outfit. And I've never understood. And Rachel was supposed to do an experiment with her own clothes, but like she didn't. So I'm sorry, we can't report the results here. But like it's always like, yeah, we can like, oh, I can see your nips like through your outfit. Except that like historically, like even if we're talking about like Regency era, which is like significantly less clothing than like Victorian era. So let's even go back there. Like you're still wearing a chemise, stays, almost certainly some sort of like under whatever petticoat thing, and then like the dress over that. So like even if you're not wearing the petticoat thing, like there's still 3 layers between your nips and the outside world. And
Yeah.
I've always been like, how the fuck? Because in this instance, it's specifically like the boning in Beth's corset, because corsets have boning now because it's the Victorian era. Like the boning in the corset prevents her nips from being seen. She's like, oh, good. Like, I'm not being exposed because of like the structure of my corset. And I'm like, even without that, you're wearing 3 layers. Can like people report back? Can you just please tell me? I'm just like, I've truly
Allison,
never understood this.
Allison, I just have 3 words for you: crucifix, nail nipples.
Oh my God. Yeah, but
That's
she's
what it
naked.
is.
She's naked in that. Anyway, please report back. Have you ever been wearing multiple layers of clothes? Let's say like 3 layers of clothing. And let's take into the fact that modern clothes are going to be like thinner than like what you're going to get here. You're wearing 3 layers of clothing, one of which is a bra. Have you ever been able to see your nipples through your shirt? Ever? I don't understand. The people who write romance novels have nipples. Like, what kind of experience are you guys having with your nips? I don't understand. I've never once had them. Anyway, they make out.
You can't see
And
her
Beth
nipples
is
through
like,
a corset.
Beth is constantly throughout. Like we talked about Mrs. Barrington throughout the book. Beth is like, oh, Mrs. Barrington would say to do this, and then she proceeds to like completely disregard like the Mrs. Barrington advice. And Beth is like, after all, like, why should I not make out with this hot man in my drawing room? Like, if I want to, and I'm like, yeah, I love this. Go, Beth. Good for you. I mean, you're going to marry him in like 2 days, but like, for now, you're just living your hot girl summer.
Yeah. I mean, she also does like constantly, like towards the end, like she's like, yeah, Mrs. Barrington always said like ladies shouldn't drink despite the like decanter of whiskey at her bedside table.
And then she like knocks back a fucking like,
yeah,
like, oh, whatever, shots time.
Okay. So next thing that happens is that Inspector Fellows comes and corners Beth and basically is like, I'm here to warn you, like you need to not throw in your lot with the Mackenzies because like I won't be able to protect you. And then he also is like, why don't you marry me? Like he also does he get a book or no? Because like I just don't. It just seems so random.
I think so. I don't know. I only ever read the first 4.
Yeah. I was like, at this point, like, let's just play a game. Like, how many marriage proposals will Beth get? Because
honestly, like, she's hot as fuck. And like, why not? Yeah, she's like, you should marry me. Also, they've murdered 2 sex workers, just an FYI. Also, if you won't marry me, what if you spy on them for me? Mm-hmm. And Beth is like, no, man, I am loyal. I ain't no narc.
Yeah.
And then he like momentarily tries to blackmail her.
He's like, I know about your background. Like, I'll tell on you to them. And he's like, I won't be merciful. Like, if you throw in your lot with them, like, I'll have you as an accomplice. And I was just like laughing at this because what an empty threat. Like, at this point in time, not only would a woman like not go to jail for her husband's crimes, if a woman committed a crime, but like her husband told her to do it, she wouldn't even go to jail because it's called marital coercion. It's just like assumed that like husbands were so like, physically domineering and abusive that like her life was at stake if she didn't like obey it. So like that, so she was coerced. Yeah. Like what? I don't know.
You might not have been able to own property, my friends, but you could have avoided a murder charge simply by blaming your husband.
Yep.
Small comforts, my friends. Small comforts. Yeah. God. So Beth is like, fuck no, I'm loyal. And Beth, listen, guys, Beth knows how to deal with cops because Beth is like, you know what? I have a lawyer. Why don't you go fucking speak to him, dickwad? Like, we're done. And friends, once again, I know we've said it. I forget which episode we said it on, but just a reminder, if a cop ever comes to you, do not speak to them without a lawyer because the cops are never your friends. They're just trying to convict as soon as possible. They don't really care. Do not speak to cops without a lawyer. Do not let them come into your house without a warrant. Be like Beth. Direct them to your lawyer at all times. Anyway, Ian pops up and he's like, oh my fucking God, you're talking to Beth. You're not allowed to talk to Beth ever. I am going to kick your ass. And Fellows is like, fuck you. And Ian is like, fuck you. And it's like, yeah, it's like that. What's that video where it's like, what's your name? Ezekiel. Fuck you, Ezekiel. What's your name? What's your name? Tony. Fuck you, Tony. And then they just scream, fuck you. Like, it's just like two men, like, across, like one of them is on an island. And like they're just screaming fuck you. Like that's what this is until like Fellows finally like stomps out.
Yep.
Also at one point Ian is like, wow, like I want her to suck my dick. And also I want her to leave hickeys on my dick.
Yeah.
Is that a thing? I just can't imagine.
She thinks that while she's like wanted to do a love bite.
No. Because he thinks it. And then later on, when she gives him a blowjob, she's like, oh, I want to leave a hickey on his dick. But they both are like, he's like, I want her to leave hickeys on my dick. Like it just in his mind. He does not say this out loud. And then like 3 chapters later, Beth is like, oh, I want to leave hickeys on his dick. And I'm just like, is that like,
I don't. Yeah.
Would that ever not be just extremely painful? Like, I'm intrigued. If anyone has ever like non-painfully like left hickeys on a dick before, let us know. Write it.
Yeah.
I just like don't like whether you've received a hickey on your dick or whether like you've left a hickey on your dick on another person's dick.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because that just seems like it would be so like that just seems like there would be no way. Like think about how hard you would have to suck.
And like, and on what part? Like, you know, like it doesn't really, yeah.
Later on, they're invited to a ball, and the only thing that happens here is like Ian sends her a note, and he's like, "Make haste, like come urgently to this room upstairs." Yeah. And she's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong? Like I have to go." And she like runs upstairs. She's like, "Oh, what's wrong?" And he is like, "I just want to like make out, like like what?" And she's like, "I literally thought someone was fucking stabbing you." Yeah. And but they make out anyway, and it's fine. Now Beth is in the park. Fellows like accosts her in the park, and then Ian sees Fellows talking to Beth, and he is like comes to like he just goes absolutely feral. He's like ready to beat Fellows up, but also like it's described as like he has like a walking stick, and it's described as he has like rage in every step. And all I am picturing is like an old man like shouting, "Get off my lawn," except it's like Ian being like, "Get off my woman," and just like beating him with this walking stick. Like it's just like I have difficulty taking this seriously. Anyway, Mac and Curry, Ian's valet, have to hold Ian back, and Fellows is like, "I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too," and then like scurries off into like the rat hole that he comes from. But it's so cute when like after like Mac calms Ian down, he like gives him a little kiss on the forehead, and I just really like there's like we get like a lot of moments like this throughout the book of like the Mackenzie brothers just like, yeah, they're like, you know, quote unquote man's men, like, you know, like they're like tough and like Scottish and all of that, but like they just are constantly showing like little like tender moments and like physical affection and like telling each other that they love each other, and it's just like really like cute. I'm like, oh, look at you guys, like look at you, good for you, Scottish man.
Yeah.
She gets naked, like totally naked in Mac's art studio, and this is when Ian is like, her waist snipped in from years of wearing a corset, and I was like, this book was doing so well. It was doing so well with not slandering corsets. Guys, it's just not, it's not, a corset does not change. Like maybe for like an hour or two afterward, you've been wearing it particularly tight, like the imprint will still be left. You know what I mean? It's like the same thing as if you're wearing a fucking tight bra. I know, but I'm saying like same thing if you're wearing a tight bra, if you've been wearing Spanx, like you're like, they'll be imprints left because something tight has been against your skin. But there's no such thing as permanent body modification from wearing a corset. It's not how it works. It does not change your anatomy. You know why?
Right.
Because you have ribs and hip bones.
No, and also just think about, like, logically, where is the matter going? There's a certain amount of, like, flesh. It would have to go out in some other direction. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Also, like, those imprints are not the same as, like, it's not like your body's like Play-Doh. Like, it has to go somewhere. I don't know. Yeah.
No, it's so, listen, friends, wearing corset does not change your anatomy, does not, like, it doesn't move your fucking organs, however much, like, the illustration, the, like, fake-ass illustrations you see from, like, Victorian Era of, like, the organs being moved around are, like, fake. They're made up by, like, jealous-ass doctors who were, like, mad that women were having autonomy and were honestly just wanted to, like, make fun of women and, like, whatever. It's not true, and it was so, like, I read a fucking article from, like, every time I read an article in which an actress has to wear a corset and then it's like, oh my God, I could feel like my organs being squeezed and it was horrible and it was like so tight. And I'm like, that's not the corset's fault. That's because you're wearing an article of clothing that doesn't fit you. If I wear a fucking bra that was too tight, I'd have trouble breathing too. Like, it's not changing your anatomy.
I feel like the organs thing is like, it's the same thing as like women can't go on trains because their uterus will fly out.
Yeah.
Like the whole concept of like organs being able to move around willy-nilly. Like
they used to think that, guys. Like when trains went like 30 miles per hour.
25,
like, this was
25 miles an hour.
Not like speeding.
And cars too, yeah. Yep.
They're like, oh, they can't go. Women going on bicycles, they're like, oh my God, no. Like, it's going to be hard. Like, oh my God. It's so fucking stupid. Stop the corset slander. They're just bras. They're bras with better back support. And men wore them too. And women have been wearing them. And women have been fucking working in fields. Like, it wasn't just the aristocrats. Like, all women wore stays and corsets. Oh God. Like, so dumb. Bring back the corset. I'm tired of my fucking shoulders having permanent indents in them from my bras. Like, whatever. I could have great posture now, but instead I have hunched shoulders.
Yeah, because that's like, I never understood why people would say that sports bras were so comfortable, because I can't wear a sports bra for like long periods of time without getting a headache, because it's like pinch, like the crisscross kind, because it's like pinching, I don't know, like some nerve. But then like just during the pandemic, I discovered like sports bras that just had like normal straps, and it's so much better. But like what would be even better is not having straps at all. So like
yeah. Well, I also for a long time with sports bras, I had to buy sports bras that were like 2 sizes too small. I mean, I still kind of do this. I have to buy sports bras that are smaller because my boobs are too big, and when I run, if it's not like they're not super compressed, it's painful. Anyway, yeah, so they're making out. Ian also has a thought where like he's like, I'm gonna make Beth like so fucking horny. I'm gonna give her so many orgasms that like she is just gonna like be so obsessed with me and she's gonna have to stay for me forever.
Yeah.
And I was just like reading this and I was like, so like Ian is kind of like, is he like Pavloving Beth, but like with orgasms? Like he's just training her so that every time she sees him, she just like creams a little. Like I was like, wow, brilliant. Honestly, like I wouldn't mind being Pavloved with like I feel like if you're gonna be manipulated by a man, like orgasms are not the worst way.
Yeah. And when she's like doing her pitch, she's like, we can have I forget what she calls it, like an affair or whatever. He like, she asks it like in a question or something. She's like, without getting married, and he like doesn't answer. And in his head, he's like, not answering is not the same as saying no. He's like, his whole plan is like, we're gonna get married. Okay, so the next thing that happens is they go to a casino, and it is very much like a speakeasy. Like it's hidden, I guess. Like, well, it's a speakeasy for gambling. Like roulette is illegal in France, I guess,
which is like bizarre, frankly. Like I thought the French were chill. It's like bizarre that they would like make anything illegal.
So they go in, but
they're gambling, but then the cops are coming.
The cops are coming. There's a raid orchestrated by who else but Inspector Bellows. He's like tipped them off because he's been stalking. He makes it his business to know where Ian Mackenzie is at all times.
So weird.
So
Ian gets her out. Also, he's like, gotta go.
And also importantly, this whole time he's again been holding her hand, and we were talking about how like she's wearing gloves. Like they're all wearing gloves this whole time, and like you were saying, like, oh, it wouldn't be so bad to have someone hold your hand if like you're wearing gloves because you can't like feel their hand sweat, and that's the worst part.
Yeah.
But I think for me that'd be even worse because your hands can sweat inside gloves, and just like the concept of wearing gloves at all times, I never realized how horrible that sound. Like I don't know, Like, I hated socks as a kid, and I would, like, throw them off, but obviously that was, like, you know, beat out of me. Not literally beaten out of me, but, like, the world beat it out of me. But my hands, like, can you imagine? Oh,
Yeah, I don't think I would like it, but I also think that if I'd been wearing them from, like, a young age, you know what I mean?
well, that's what I'm saying. It would've been
If
beaten
I'd
out of
kind
me,
of
I
been, like,
guess.
trained, like, I wouldn't
The
have.
same as socks, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, she's
But
holding his hand, he holds her hand even as they're running through the streets of Paris, and they eventually roll up at this seedy tavern, and they're like, "1 room, please," and they go in, there's a sexy bath scene, and then he, like, lifts her up out of the tub, and, like, the description of, like, her being wet and, like, him lifting her up out of the tub is, like, making me, like, it was giving me, like, Selkie vibes, like, you know, the Selkie,
mm,
not the clothing brand, the, like, the myth of, like, the seal women, like, those
oh,
are Selkies,
yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
About, like, the women who, like, they take their skins off, their seal skins off, and then if, like, you capture the seal skin, like, you, like, control them, and then so, like, all the myths are, like, these terrible men, like, basically, like, forcing these women to marry them,
Oh
and
god.
that's what I just, like, got this, like, vibe. I was like, I got, like, seal woman vibes
I mean,
from,
he was
like, that
definitely
description.
planning to trick her into marrying him.
In fact, yes.
Yeah. Also, like, she's like, "Oh, my dress is ruined," because it was raining before, like, that's why they're so cold or whatever. It was raining, and she's like, "Oh, my dress is ruined." I'm like, "Why?" I feel like this is a common theme of clothing, like, being caught in the rain and then being like, "Oh, it's ruined." But, like, did they not wash their clothes? Like,
I
how
don't
could
know,
like, I just don't
yeah.
understand.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's, like, stained. Well, maybe it's, like, there's certain kinds of fabrics that, like, I don't know, they have to be washed a special way because, like,
They, like, remove
water
part
will
of it, like, the
stain
outer
them.
maybe they have to remove, like, the outer part or something, I don't know, like, the frills,
Well,
whatever.
that's also the thing. That's why you wore a lot of undergarments is because so that, like, your outer dress didn't have to be washed as frequently. So it could, like, be
Mm,
worn multiple times without being washed, and all you had to do was wash the, like, more durable undergarments.
yeah.
That was the purpose of them. That's why you wear a chemise, ladies and gentlemen, so that you don't have to fucking sweat in your corset.
And you don't get marks.
Blisters, yeah.
Yeah, there's also some lovely heating bricks here, which is something that always sounds so nice until you remember that today we just have, like, indoor heat. Like, you don't need to have, like, a brick just for
No,
your
okay, no, because of that time when
Yeah.
I stayed in that Tudor lady's house, so I went up to, Northern England so I could be in the do my little Pride and Prejudice tour of the Peak District, and the Airbnb that I stayed at was this woman who, like, was just really obsessed with Tudor England, and, like, her whole thing was, like, decorated with Tudor England, and, like, her son, like, made fucking, like, armor, like Tudor armor, and she was, like, making her own beer, and she offered me some, and it was just whatever. But her room, she didn't have the heat on, and this was, like, Northern England in, like, April, so it was, like, chilly, and it was a big, like, Tudor canopy bed, and it was, like, warm, but then she had a heating pad underneath, like, the sheet, like, like, top the fitted sheet of, like, the whole bed, and that you could, like, turn it on, and it was, like, the fucking cozy, like, that's what I'm imagining, like, heated bricks,
Mm.
like, you don't like, when it's, like, below you too, and it's just, like, oh, it was so fucking cozy, like, it was I sat and I watched 2005 Pride and Prejudice, and I just really vibed.
Indeed, but even that's, like, a modern thing, so I feel like it's still better than, like, just bricks, but basically. Um, so okay, so they spend the night together in the hotel, and this is when they finally have penetrative sex, and Beth is like, "Oh, like, I hope we're not gonna get in trouble or something." Like, I don't know how it works out, but Ian's like, "Oh, actually, I knew that Fellows hates me and he's gonna follow me here and that you're gonna have no choice but to marry me, sorry." Which is kind of shitty of him, but I mean, he's not the one who orchestrated the raid at least, so, like, I don't really know what way out of this they had besides, like, trying to go home. But, yeah, he basically brings her downstairs and he's like, "Actually, here I have a priest." And Beth is like, "I'm not Catholic." And Ian's like, "Don't worry, we can have another ceremony in Scotland." And I don't know, you were saying, like,
I'm like, okay,
that's
so
still not
she's
the
like,
Church of England.
I'm C of E, right? Which is the Church of England. And he is like, don't worry, we can get married in Scotland. And I know this is a technicality. I'm sure it's the same thing, but, like, Scotland is also not in the Church of England. they're in the Church of Scotland. It's a different fucking church, and they do have different rules. Like there's like more rule. Like you could, if you were divorced, you could get married in the Church of Scotland. Like that was a whole thing until like fucking like recently. That's the thing.
Maybe they're planning to like ship in a C of E reverend or whatever to Scotland because it's closer and it's easier, and it wouldn't be the first time the British have tried to ship things into Scotland. So I don't know.
I'm just saying. I'm like Beth. Ian, like the fuck, Scotland is still not the Church of England. It's still not the same thing. But he's convincing her. She's like, oh my God, no. Like Curry shows up, the priest shows up, Max shows up, like everyone is there for the wedding. She's like, are you what? But Ian is saying shit like, I know that this man has cornered her into marrying him. I understand this. I know this is a little coercive. I know that it's not great. I adore it. And he's also saying shit like, we belong together. Like we both don't really fit into society, but like we fit together. And then he like holds her hand to his heart. And I'm like, for a man that says he does not know how to love, like this boy has got all the right moves. Like he's here.
Yeah. All the right moves in all the right places. Yeah, we're going down.
Anyway, so they go out. Fellows is like, I'm gonna arrest you for kidnapping Mrs. Ackerley, and Ian is like, Mrs. Beth Ackerley is no longer here. Lady Ian Mackenzie is. And then he's like, oh, fuck you. And they all of them, Curry, Mac, Ian, they all laugh in Fellows' face, hop in a carriage and head back to Scotland.
Oh my God.
So they're rolling up in Scotland. They're at the ducal estate. It's called Kilmorgan. Beth meets all the servants, who are all Scottish, obviously, because we're in fucking Scotland, but also all red-haired. And I'm just like, listen, I know that Scotland has a lot of red-haired people. Like that's where you want to go if you want to like meet a red-haired person. Like bunch in there, far more than the rest of the population in the world. But I just feel like for all your servants to have red hair, like that has to be something that you purposefully seek out. Like that's not just a matter of like hiring the local village lads. Like that's like, oh, you don't have red hair, you can't fucking work for the Mackenzies. And just like what a commitment to the aesthetic. Like it's implied that like Hart the Duke is like super obsessed with being Scottish, and also like later on you find in his book like he's super obsessed with Scottish independence. He's like, I want Scotland to like secede from the United Kingdom. And so like I get it, like it's on brand for him to like only hire red-haired servants, but like what a choice to make. Mackenzies.
Yeah. So something that you skip though before they get to Kilmorgan. First of all, there's a lovely basket of wine and bread mentioned. I just wanted to say that. The jam and cheese is missing, but it's a nice road snack. But they stop to pick up a Ming bowl that Ian has, like he really wants it. And Beth finds out like he called like he knew it was there. It's not like they just like happened upon it. And he was planning to leave Paris like no matter what, either way. And she's like, oh, so you would have left like no matter what? And Ian's like, I would have brought you with me no matter what. I wouldn't have left you. Like as if. And we find out that the reason he's there for the bowl is because Mathers wanted it. And Mathers like walks in right after. And he's like, I'm going to sue both of you. Because like you could sue people for breaking off an engagement back in the day. Or whatever. Basically, Ian like buys him off by like he comes in with another bowl and Ian like buys it for a lot more than Mathers was like planning to buy it for. And we find out with Ian, like Ian does not barter. He just like he sniffs the bowl, he gives it a little lick, and he like immediately knows what its quote unquote intrinsic worth is. So like in the beginning, he bought a bowl for Mather for like half price, like what Mather thought it was worth. Here in this scene, he buys the bowl from like the merchant for $600 when the merchant wanted to sell it for $300, and then he pays Mather like $1,200 for something he was going to trade for like $500. And Beth is like constantly commenting on how Ian like doesn't have to worry about like details and whatever, like cause his
money.
Valet, who we haven't mentioned, not just money, but like
we mentioned Curry.
Sorry, Curry. Yeah. Who Curry does it for
just
him.
Like handles everything for him.
And this is just like, Ian just does not have like any concept and
no thoughts, just Ming porcelain vibes
and tastes.
Yes, and sniffs and smell all the senses for Ming porcelain.
So back at Kilmorgan.
They're at Kilmorgan, and Hart is there unexpectedly, and Hart is a dick to Beth. He's like brushing her off. He's like constantly rude. And Beth is like, I'm good. How are you? Like, he's like talking about her like in the third person, like as if she isn't there. And she's like, I'm good. Nice to meet you. How are you? Like, oh, guess what? You're my brother-in-law now. Okay, bye. And like she leaves with Ian, and Ian is just like, I literally have such a fucking boner right now. He's like, this is the most amazing thing that I've ever witnessed. Like, this is incredible.
Because Ian thinks that the only reason because Ian, I don't know if we said this, but Ian like basically has a perfect memory. Like he can remember any conversation, like any numbers, like everything. And so Hart like often asks him to like consult basically and like tell him what to
Hart
do
is
for like
big in
different
like
decisions.
politics.
Yeah. And Ian like has a perfect memory. So he's like very good for that. And Ian thinks that like that's the only reason that Hart like sprung him from the asylum because he's like useful to him or whatever. But yeah, so Beth basically stands up to Hart when like no one ever does. And Hart is like a total dick. I don't know. The whole like drama that's gonna happen at the end of this book is completely Hart's fault. Just keep that in mind.
It definitely is. Listen, Hart also has a lot of trauma, but definitely his fault. Not an excuse, but like, you know. So they go to dinner. Once again, Beth is roasting Hart. But also we discover that Ben researched Ming porcelain because they're like talking about the bowls, and like Ian showed her his collection, and he's like, oh, how do you know all this? And she's like, oh, I read a book in Paris. And I just love when they research each other's interests. And they're just like, yeah.
Because Ian's whole thing in the beginning, like Mather was like, oh, I'm going to sell this bowl to you to like get money to buy my new wife, like horses or whatever. And Ian's like, why would any woman ever want horses and dresses instead of this Ming bowl? Like, what, are you crazy? And then like earlier in the scene when they stopped on the way from Paris to buy the bowl, like Beth says something like, oh, aren't like Ming bowls and vases like the same? And Ian's like, no, have I made a mistake? But then don't worry, Beth is going to redeem herself like here and then later when
he shows her his collection, and then he like gives her one of the bowls that he bought, like the red and white one that she liked.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my god, like thank you so much, this is so sweet. And he's like, better than a team of horses. And she's like, yes, but a weird question. He's like
good. So
after dinner, Ian goes to memorize a treaty, and Beth goes and hangs out in the garden with the dogs. And then Hart, like the creepy little bastard he is, sneaks up behind her and is like, I know what you're up to.
And he's like, I know that like you saw Ian, like he was vulnerable and you were trying to like just get him for his money, like poaching him. And she's like, I guess your information didn't go far enough to tell you that I already have my own money. And he's like, 100,000 pounds on a house. Like that's nothing compared to Ian, which like, I'm still unclear on how like younger brothers' money worked, because I feel like I always thought that like you basically get nothing if you're a younger sibling, but like, what's the deal with that?
It's like you have nothing if your like father/older brother doesn't give you anything. But like I think it's like, I guess it's like implied that like Kilmorgan is like such like a vast estate and like so rich that like Hart can afford to provide his brothers with like ample living. And also they also all have their own, like Cameron like trains horses and like he's a horse breeder, like that's his thing. He's like super good at it, so like he has his own income. Like Mac is like a talented painter, so like he has that income. And Ian, like at one point they do say that like, oh, when he came out of the asylum, that like he like helped out with the family investments and is like really increased, like they were already rich, but he's like quadrupled their wealth. So like Ian has like, they're all sort of like contributing. But yeah, typically like younger brothers don't have anything, but like if your brother wants, it's like the same thing in Bridgerton. Like Benedict can afford to be an artist, Colin can afford to go colonize, Gregory can afford to have 9 kids and literally do nothing else with his life because Anthony is like providing for all of them.
Yeah. So yeah, he's like, basically, I know you're like trying to get one over on us, and like I'm gonna have the marriage annulled, like 100%. And he's like, I bet you learned a thing or two in the workhouse, because like Beth lives in a workhouse, which is just like such a dick thing to say. Like even though he recognizes that her mom got scammed and like, you know, she doesn't come from. This is all just like the cyclical, like hypocritical, nonsensical, like bad blood thing, because they'll be like, oh, blood will out, but it's like her mom had like quote unquote good blood, like her grandfather was a squire. So doesn't that like disprove your theory? And whatever. He's mean. He's like, I know you had rats in your like rectory with your old like dead husband. And she's like, yeah, we did. It was a whole family, Nebuchadnezzar and his wife and their 3 children, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
They're like, but he's like, this woman is insane. Oh my God.
Which, if you don't know, is an Old Testament reference.
Yeah.
You ever seen Veggie
It's a
Tales? The
niche
bunny.
Bible reference.
Yeah, you wouldn't get it unless you're cool and watch Veggie Tales.
But Beth, like, once again, she calls hard out. She's like, why? Like, you actually believe Ian is mad. Like, even though you got him out of the, like, asylum, like, you still think he's crazy. Like, you're infantilizing him. Like, why don't you believe that, like, you don't believe that, like, I could actually love him? And Hart, like, doesn't answer, but, like, that's, like, an answer and of
Hart's
itself.
like, yeah, he is crazy. Yeah.
And, like, Beth is like, fuck you. And Hart is like, you're still getting a divorce. And he turns around. And once again, just like with the Fellows scene, when Fellows asked Beth to spy, like, Ian is there and, like, Hart, like, bumps into him. And Ian is like, I will kill you if you touch my wife ever again. Like, I will rip off your fucking hands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great. I really love these scenes where Ian just threatens to murder anyone who touches Beth, who's mean to her in the slightest way.
And yeah, so Hart finally backs down, but he's like, don't worry, I'll get an annulment, like, at the drop of a hat if you do anything wrong. Which I don't know how that works.
My pretty.
Yeah. And so Ian takes Beth up to, like, his wing of the house, which what exactly is a wing? Like, is it a vertical slice, or is it just like, I always thought it was just like a chunk of a floor. It's unclear. But basically he has like a big suite of rooms or whatever. And he's like, this is where, we each have our own wing, all the 4 brothers. This is where we bring guests if we ever have them. And Beth is like, do you often have guests? And he's like, no, you're the first one. And she's like, well, if someone has to marry you to be your guest, I'm not surprised you haven't had more.
And Beth is like constant. Beth is like very sarcastic. She has like a very like wide sense of humor. And Ian is constantly like, I don't understand what the fuck you're talking about, but like, that's cute anyway. He's like, whatever. Like, oh, little Beth. He's like patting her.
Yeah. He also constantly is just like zoning out and stops listening when she's talking. And we hear this like a few times.
Everybody though.
But then finally she's like, oh, he took on the stance where I could tell he's like stopped listening to me. But I know that like a week from now he'll come back to like an exact phrase and like grill me on it. So like I guess he just like somehow imbibes the information without like actually processing it in the moment. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
So Ian's like, all right, here's like your room, but you're totally sleeping in my room. And Beth is like, Mrs. Barrington told me that like I heard once that it's dangerous to sleep next to a woman when she sleeps because she exhales noxious fumes. But Mrs. Barrington says that that's not
said
true.
that was bullshit.
Yeah. I'm like, what a
concept. Listen, I know this is a thing in historicals that like it's like romantic that the hero is like, no, like we're not gonna have separate bedrooms, like we're gonna share a room. And like that, it's like a grand gesture thing or whatever. But I mean, not a grand gesture, but it's like romantic. But I'm like, I don't know, like separate bedrooms seems like pretty great. Like I guess if you guys have like the same sleeping habits and like neither of you snores sleeping together and you're both like in a king side bed, but like otherwise, like guys, men are more prone to like sleep apnea and snoring and like restless sleeping, and women are more prone to insomnia. So when you combine those things in a heterosexual relationship, it means that the woman is just chronically sleep deprived.
No, but also like from this perspective, so we always had twin beds. Like I had a twin bed until after college, but a lot of people have queen beds. So like even a king is only double a twin. That's like less space than you would have had as a child. Like what?
Yeah, no, it's so, and like, yeah, if you're going, yeah, it's not romantic to me. It's always like portrayed as romantic, but I am personally a big fan of bringing back like second bed. Like I understand that most people don't have like room in their house for like each spouse to have a separate bedroom. I understand that, but I'm just saying like if possible, I feel like there shouldn't, like, I feel like we look down on people. We assume that like, oh, a divorce is on the way if you have separate bedrooms. But I'm just like, I just feel like it would be better. And statistically, for a lot of people, it does actually improve your sex life.
But listen, if people have enough room for their children to all have separate bedrooms, like I feel like it makes much more sense for 2 children to have to share a bedroom than adults. Like it's just, you're an adult. The children will have plenty of time to have, you know what I mean? Like the children aren't sharing a bed. Like, I don't know. If it really comes down to that, like, I don't know. I don't know when we decided that, like, I don't know. Whatever.
Anyway, it's not shameful if you and your spouse have contrasting sleeping habits for the health of your relationship. It's better for your relationship.
Even if you have the same sleeping habit, like,
no, I understand.
But like, your sleeping habit is to move around a lot. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's like, I understand. Some people like sleeping together, like sleeping in the same bed. They like cuddling, like that's comfortable for them, and that's great. If that's your thing, more power to you. I just don't think it would be my thing. They have a lot of sex, and then
they spend the next few weeks Beth gets riding lessons from Cameron, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, Cameron and his son. And Ian is just like bopping around, like not really seeing that much of Beth, like doing businessy shit and whatnot. But then, so Beth finally gets like comfortable on a horse, and like through some rigmarole, like Cameron has to go back or whatever. She's like riding by herself when she comes upon this like folly, which is like a fake ruined castle, and she overhears Hart and Ian talking, and they're talking about Sally Tate and Lily Martin, who are the two murdered sex workers. And basically, like, both of them are talking about how like Hart's like, why did you marry her? Like, don't you know how dangerous this is? Like, blah 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 blah. And they're like going back and forth. And then Ian's like, well, we all know that like if I marry her, she can't testify against me because a wife isn't considered a credible witness against her husband. And Beth's like, oh my gosh, that's the only reason. But can I just say, that's the way it's phrased in the book. A wife isn't considered a credible witness against her husband. That's not the reason there's a marital privilege. It's because the public policy is like, so the state's not interfering in like a marital relationship. Like, so it's not interfering in marriage. That's why you can't testify against your spouse. Like, it's not like, oh, you're not credible.
Well,
but yeah,
my
whatever.
guess is that it was probably like just like, well, because today it's like you can't force a spouse to testify against.
No,
right?
No, the privilege belongs to the spouse who's on trial. So if you're married to someone, even if you want to testify against them, you can't if they won't let you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
But we never really get an explanation of why he says this. Beth is like, understandably like, what the fuck? Like he's just like tricked me.
Because Ian can't lie. My interpretation of it was that it was like, he was like, yes, that's like objectively true. He's just kind of like saying it. I swear to God, when I first read this book, there was like a line in which he was like, where he was basically like, I was just like placating, like, no, I can't lie. But like, he's like, yeah, that's true. But like, I was basically just like placating Hart. He's like, I just didn't want to like get into it about like why I wanted to marry you. But like, that wasn't in the audiobook. But maybe I need to go back because I have a physical copy of this book, and I'll see if it's like in the physical copy. But like, I swear to God, like I was waiting for that. We never got it.
It's like some faerie shit. It's like the fairies saying like, I can't lie, to like lull you into like thinking they can't lie, but like really they're just like lying in all these different, tricksy by omission ways. That's Ian. He's like his whole thing is like, not responding is not the same as saying no.
Listen, there is a very strong connection between like fairy changeling lore and like probable like historical autism, like before they actually had a name for it. Because like, so like for those of you not in the know, the changeling myth is like the fairies have stolen your baby and replaced it with like an identical baby that's actually a fairy baby. And so like your child like suddenly changes personality and starts acting different, and it's like whatever, like it's because the fairies have like done a changeling. And it's theorized that a lot of these were probably just like babies on the autism spectrum that like because it's like, oh, your baby stops talking, oh, your baby stops developing the way that like that a neurotypical baby would. And so you think it's a changeling because it's usually not newborns. It's usually like, a 9-month-old. And like that's usually the age that autism symptoms, particularly like if you have a more severe form of autism, like that's usually the time that it starts to like be obvious and like starts to develop, like when you're learning to speak and when you're learning to like. And so yeah, there's like a pretty like strong like theory that like a lot of the like quote unquote changeling cases were probably just like autism spectrum babies.
I never heard that before. It makes sense. Yeah. Ian's a
so anyway, Ian is a fairy confirmed. Ian is a changeling child confirmed.
Yeah. Beth is like freaking out. She's like, she goes back and lays on her bed and she's like, I can finally breathe now that my corset's off.
Ian comes back, they get in a fight about it. Ian has like a meltdown. Like he's just like way overstimulated. He's like, oh my God, she heard it. Like, oh my God, she knows about Sally Martin. Because Ian's whole thing, he's like, I don't want her to know about that, because he's like, I remember everything. And I want to be able to like separate that part, because like it was like traumatizing for him, because he like saw like the blood. He was like covered in her blood and like saw all her blood. Like Sally Martin was stabbed. And he's like, I don't want, because I like remember everything, like if Beth starts getting involved in that, then I'm gonna like have to, so I'm not gonna be able to like compartmentalize like Beth from like that thing, and I don't want her to be involved in that. Yeah. So Ian has a meltdown. He goes and like forces this poor garden boy to like load a gun for him over and over and over again, and just like is shooting a gun at like random rocks.
Yeah, and blowing them apart. Is that like, I don't know. It just
I
doesn't
mean,
seem
I
like
get like if I shot a bullet at a rock, I'd feel like it probably like anyway, he's finally and Beth is like finally manages to calm him down. They like go back and then the next day Ian disappears. And this is something that we learned earlier that Ian does when he gets like overstimulated or has a meltdown is that he just kind of like goes and bops off and like hangs out in the Scottish countryside for like a week, but like he always comes back. Like that's his thing. So this is what Ian's done. He's like gone off to like hang out in the Scottish countryside and just like fish with like a crotchety local man that like he's befriended.
yeah.
And
His
I
like
just
meltdown
like
man.
I don't like read this and I was like, wow, I wish I too could like disappear to the Scottish countryside like every time I just like needed a break from people. Like that just sounds like such an ideal arrangement. Sounds amazing. But yeah, Beth decides to dip as well. She's gone to London.
To her house that used to belong to Mrs. Barrington. So when Ian gets back and he finds out that Beth is gone, he's like,
she's gone to London to investigate like the
the
murders. She's like, I'm just gonna get to the bottom of this. Like, I don't give a fuck.
And well, didn't they had like a long conversation about how Ian thinks it's Hart, don't they?
Yeah, Ian suspects Hart, and we later learn that like Hart suspects
Yeah.
Ian. They've basically spent the like past 5 years trying to like protect each other from murder charges when it turns out that neither of them did the murder.
Yeah, because they had like kind of a heart to heart. I was thinking this was later, but like, yeah, before he goes to the Scottish countryside, they have like an understanding where like Beth, forgives. She's not still mad at him. She just wants to solve the mystery. But Ian comes back and he's like, "Why did you let her go, Curry?" Like, and Curry is like, "What did you expect me to do?" Lock her. I don't know why I'm doing a Scottish accent. He has a Cockney accent. I can't really do that. Lock her in the dungeon, and Ian's like, "Yes." Sorry, lock her in a dungeon, and Ian says yes. And the implication of a dungeon versus the dungeon is that this Kilmorgan, this house, has multiple dungeons, which brings me back to my question about the wings, because you were like, "Oh, each brother probably has their own personal dungeon underneath his wing," but like that implies that a wing is a vertical slice, not just like a section of a floor.
I don't know. I think it can depend. I
Yeah.
think wings can be a lot of different things depending on the size of the house.
I considered Googling this and then I just didn't. So
If anyone's familiar with like
yeah.
large house architecture and like how that works, because I'm also thinking of Beauty and the Beast, and now he's like, stay out of the West Wing or whatever.
West implies that it's a whole slice because like
No, West, but I think it's just like an upper floor. You know what I mean? Like in Beauty and the Beast, I think it's just like an upper western floor, but like that's also a castle. So like, can you really divide it into vertical slices? Like, that's just going to be too big? But then you also like that just made me think. Just saying this right now remind me the show The West Wing. The West Wing being like where the president's offices are in the White House, and like that's a whole like the West Wing is like a whole like that's where the president lives. Like it's a whole thing. So like, and I feel like that's multiple floors.
No, she's not in the dungeon. She's in London, and she talks to fellers.
She's not in the dungeon. She's in.
She talks to fellers because I have the dog thing, the kind of dogs thing. I feel like she's
she interviews fellows, and she's like, "Listen, give me all the deets. I'm gonna get to the bottom of this because you're incompetent. Ian is being dumb. Hart is being dumb. I'm the only one that can solve this. Like, I don't understand why we allowed men to handle this case for 5 years. Like, y'all have let a real murderer get away. Like, I'm gonna solve this."
She's like, "Can you just for a second, just stay with me here. Consider that you might have been wrong this whole time and get on board."
She's like, "Can you be cool?"
And
be cool.
she's
be
like,
cool
she's like,
like
listen. She's like, listen. The Mackenzies are nice to their dogs, all right? They can't be all bad. And I would say that being mean to dogs is definitely an indication of being like a mean, bad person. But I don't think bad people can be nice to dogs, especially like, you know what I mean? Like it's not like an if this, that, it's not like a contrapositive type situation. Like there's some bad people are also nice to dogs. So she gets the deets from Bellers and she heads on over to her old parish to interview some of the like local sex workers who might have known Sally and Lily. And she runs into Molly, who's like, "Blimey, it's the missus," who I guess like still remembers her from like 9 years ago as like, the Reverend's wife. Yeah. And she's like, "I heard you married a right knob." And Beth is like, "News travels fast." Like she's like, "Did you?" And then Beth also brings. Wait, why is Daniel with Beth? Beth brings Daniel.
Daniel just like hitches a ride on her carriage, and they get to the train station in Scotland. And Daniel's like, "Can I come with you? Like, I just want to come with you on an adventure." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Daniel
sure.
remembers Cameron's like 15-year-old son, and so she brings Daniel. Beth brings Daniel with her to interview Molly, and Molly's like, "Oh, why'd you bring him? Did you bring him here so I could make him a man?" Like, She's like, let's get down to it.
No, he's a child. Anyway.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
Ian pops over to Mrs. Barrington's house, and the butler, who should have been loyal to Beth, is a snitch. He's like, oh, she went over to like this place, her old parish, but she only took like a little boy with her. So like, it's probably not safe. I'm like, where's your loyalty? Like, come on, this is your fucking mistress, dude. Like, and you've known her for like way longer. Whatever. And then
she has this bit of information, and then Ian tells her the deets. He's basically, he's like, listen, I found Sally Tate. She was stabbed. She was trying to blackmail Hart because she has, we find out, not in this book, in a later book, she had like nude photos of him, and she was like trying to blackmail him. Yeah, there's a lot of nude photos in Hart's past,
like
and
actual
his future.
photos.
Yes, it's the 1880s, my dude. It's the 1880s.
I just can't believe. Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, they have photos, nude photos of him in his youth. Anyway, she was trying to blackmail Hart, and then like Ian saw Hart like choking Sally because like it was like a kink thing, you know, he was like, you know, whatever. And then Ian like left, and then like Hart ran away. So Ian's at this one, he's like, yeah, so I thought Hart did it. And Beth is like, neither of you did it. Like there's definitely something else going on here. And Ian is like, oh my God, like in his head, he's like, why the fuck does she keep trying to see the good in people? Like, why can't she just admit that some people suck? Like why is she such a good person? And then he's like, and this is also when he admits, I forget how this comes up, but he says that the reason his dad sent him to the asylum was because he saw his dad kill his mom.
His dad was like, you need to lie. And Ian was like, I can't lie. And so his dad got him like committed. It's the classic, you see your dad kill your mom and sends you to the insane asylum situation. Alice Cullen, Ian Mackenzie.
That's true.
Like, yeah, it's a repetitive theme, which I feel like just speaks more to the banality of domestic violence, unfortunately.
Oh my
but
okay. Thank you, Rachel. Anyway, Beth goes to Holborn House, which is Hart's sex palace that he used to own, but then he sold it to his like first mistress / like low-key a predator. Okay, so let's talk about this. Mrs. Palmer is now the owner of High Holborn House, and she like, you know, she's like a madame. She has a bunch of sex workers there. Like she's like Hart's former mistress. Like they run like a little kink shop. And Mrs. Palmer says that she is like 13 years older than Hart, and she met him when he was 20. Which means that like this woman was like in her 30s when she started a sexual relationship with like essentially a child. And I just feel like this is never really addressed, that like how much of a predator Mrs. Palmer is. Like that's a big age gap. That's a big age gap.
I thought where you were going was how they're all like basically keeping these women in like captivity, and like Hart quote unquote owns all of them. Like that's the language they use. He owns them.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't really have a lot of sympathy for even 20-year-old Hart, frankly.
I mean, I feel like the book does emphasize that it's like consent, like it's like a dom sub relationship.
But I feel like some of the women were like trying to leave, and they were like, we stopped them.
No, because at one point, okay, this is another thing. I mean, this isn't in this book. It's another thing in Hart's book is that we find out that like Mrs. Palmer tried to like trick this girl into like being a sex worker, and like she didn't want to do it. And Hart found out and got like really fucking pissed at Mrs. Palmer, and like got the girl a job and like gave her money and was like, go like live somewhere else. So it's definitely like Hart is very much on the consent train in this kink. If we have one good thing to say about Hart is that he wants consent.
Yeah. I guess Mrs. Palmer sucks then. I don't know. Yeah.
Mrs. Palmer's a predator.
I mean, we know she sucked. But like I wasn't thinking of it like that. But I don't know.
I was always very uncomfy with that. I was like, I don't like this 33-year-old woman like starting a sexual relationship with a 20-year-old guy. And I know there's like a power, like Hart definitely like socially has more power, but it's still like this, again, this man's his prefrontal cortex, whatever the fuck thing. It's his brain's not developed yet. And this like full on adult. Here's my thing. If it was the opposite though, like
it happens all the time. Every other historical is the opposite. That's what I was gonna say.
No, but I'm creeped out by that in every other historical.
Yeah,
when he's in his 30s, when there's like more than a 10-year age gap, I'm like, I don't like it. Anyway, Mrs. Palmer's running the house. So Beth goes to like investigate. After she and Ian have sex, and Ian's like, promise me not to investigate. And Beth is like, well, you can't lie, but I can. So yeah, sure, I'm not going to do that. And then she like puts us off, and she locks Ian in the room and like steals the key to like in order to delay him because she knows he's going to come after her. So yeah, she goes as investigates, and Ian comes after her, and then she sees Mrs. Palmer running down the stairs, and she's like, oh my god, that's definitely the murderer. And then she gets stabbed and then kidnapped by Mrs. Palmer. It just really really is wild in here. Like this last like 50 pages of this book
just completely
like really
goes off.
It's just madcap, like full speed, full throttle ahead. It's like fucking Kingda Ka, like zoom 0 to 60.
Mrs. Palmer basically stabs her because Mrs. Palmer is like, I'm about to get caught, so I need like a ransom victim. And I guess like you need to be stabbed in order to be a feasible ransom victim, which I guess like, you know, this woman knows her own strength. She's like, that's pretty strong. I don't know if I could like physically overpower her without the aid of a knife. And she somehow gets Beth into a cab and convinces the cab driver to like think that they're drunk. Like she somehow, I just can't picture like,
she's like, I need to get my sister
you're
home.
walking, yeah, and covers them with a blanket so they don't see the knife in her side. But like, she was.
I think she's taken out the knife at this point. I think Beth just has a stab wound.
She's just bleeding. She's bleeding out. Okay.
Yes.
And she takes them for some reason to Beth's old vicarage, right?
Well, she's gonna go to her sister's house, and then Beth is like, why don't you just drop me off at a church so like I can be found, so like someone can take care, so I can get help faster, and then you still have time to escape. And she's like, oh look, a church, a completely unknown to me church, why don't we go in there? So she goes into the vicarage of like her former husband. She's like, this is my turf now, bitch. Except that, you know, she's bleeding out, so she really doesn't have that much stuff. Anyway, we get a full confession. Basically the deal is that Mrs. Palmer she's like obsessed with Hart, and she killed Lily, the most recent sex worker, to be stabbed because like Lily was like threatening like Hart, and basically like Mrs. Palmer like only cares about protecting Hart. She like does not give a shit whether Ian hangs for it, whether like anyone else hangs for it. Like she only cares about Hart. And then while she's dying, Beth figures out, she's like, oh my god, like, so we forgot to mention this, Lily and Sally were lovers, like they were girlfriends, but they got in a little spat. And so it turns out, so Beth figures out like, oh, like Lily must have stabbed Sally like when Sally broke up with her, and so like she was the person that murdered her. And somehow Beth manages to like figure this out while she's like on this pew, like having hallucinations of her dead husband Thomas, and like in general just having a bad time of it. But Ian is like, ooh, time to save the day, and he rushes in. And instead of being taken to jail, Mrs. Palmer is like, I'm gonna stab myself in the chest.
Which is like the second time we've heard about someone stabbing themselves in the chest in this book, I would just like to say.
Wait, what was the first time?
Didn't fucking Cameron's wife stab herself in the chest?
She did.
Yeah. Which like is a very dramatic and painful and difficult, I feel like, method. I don't know. I don't want to.
I don't know. Like, I know if you hit like a specific place by your clavicle, like that's like a main artery, and you can bleed out really quickly.
Yikes.
Which I know from the Lisa Kleypas IRA book.
You got to know that it's critical information when you're in the IRA. I will do that.
How to stab someone quickly.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Anyway, so Beth gets rescued. Mrs. Palmer dies, and like I understand she's like dying, but like I don't know, like Hart, he like holds her in his arms and he's like, it's okay, which is like, you know, like objectively a decent thing to do, like regardless of what this person's done, like this, you know, you had like a 20-year relationship with them, like, and they're dying in your arms, like, you know, don't be a dick. But I just feel like Hart is not mad enough about the fact that she has like already murdered someone else, attempted to murder his sister-in-law, like in general was like a bad person. Yeah. Like I feel like Hart never really reckons with that.
No.
I feel like we could get a little more.
Yeah, Hart just does not. I don't know. This is all because he's a dickwad. I don't know. Whatever. Mrs. Palmer's dead, but you know who's not dead yet is Beth. So Ian like gets her.
You're dead. I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
They get her back. They get her back to the house.
And Ian has like a standoff with Hart. And this is when he's like, I admired you and worshipped you just like your tame sluts. And this is like one of many instances where like either Hart or Ian or someone is just like referring to sex workers as like whores and sluts and like literal objects. Like, I don't know. Like they're literally like, oh, well, they're not people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because Ian is saying this in the thing is like, you didn't treat me like a person, which I guess is like kind of like Ian's like, you didn't treat them like people, you didn't treat me like people, like you just used me.
I would say that gets Ian off, except that earlier he was like thinking
Yeah,
about how
no,
he has
no,
to
no,
show
no.
Beth respect, unlike like if she
Yeah,
was a
no.
whore. So I don't know. But yeah, but basically Hart's like, I'm sorry, like I didn't, that's not how I think of you. Like I love you, whatever, you're my brother.
And
I
Ian's like,
yeah.
fuck off, I don't want you here. If like,
Mm-hmm.
if I have to say goodbye to Beth, I don't want you to be in here.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
He's like,
fuck
this is
off.
your fault. Which it is. But Beth
Which
is like,
listen, Hart
yeah.
does feel guilty about. Hart is not there's Hart is in no capacity like trying to act like it's not his fault. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like Hart does is very much like he feels the guilt of it.
Mm-hmm.
So like he at least has that going for him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He's not
Yeah.
totally absconding responsibility.
Right, for sure. And Ian like compares him to their dad. He's like, you look just like him, like you're in a rage, and Hart's like, insult me all you want, but like don't compare me to him. Like
They basically all have
yeah,
daddy. They all have
yeah.
various daddy trauma because their dad was just like the worst person
Yeah.
ever.
So okay, so Beth is like feverish. She's like, going in and out. Like all these people are visiting. Ian's like the entire time sickbed scene. I don't think he leaves once.
During the sickbed scene, Ian is like, he finally learns to love. He finally realizes that he's in love with her. And he's like, he says, and I love this quote. Like, this quote is like one of those quotes that's just like permanently like imprinted in my mind, where it's just like, is this what feels like? I don't like it, my Beth. It hurts too much. And it's just the cutest fucking thing.
So Ian has like learned how to change Beth's sheets. Like he's like read books on like how to be a housemaid basically. And Beth is like, oh, well, the upstairs maids aren't going to like that. Like very snobbish are upstairs maids. Like you're taking their job from them. And Ian's like, I never understand anything you say. And then Beth is like in the, she's like coming in on a fever. And like another one of the times she's like, oh, I solved the mystery. Like, and Ian's like, but she's like, I know who killed Lily Martin. And Ian's like, I don't care who killed her. And Beth's like, but I solved the mystery. I solved it. Like finally.
You get a sick bed hand job scene. Because like she wakes up, she's like, my fever is broken and I am horny as shit.
Well, no, we're like Beth recovered quickly from her fever, but the stab wound took far longer. I just thought that was, I don't know, just
Yeah,
funny the way it was phrased.
Yeah. So Ian is like, once again, he was feral when Beth had a fever, and he's feral when Beth wakes up, and he's just like ready. He's like, oh my god, like I am literally never leaving your side ever again. Not once. Like you're prepare to be sick of me. Prepare to be sick of me. And then Beth is like, hang on, I have one more mystery to reveal. She's walking around like Beth is like acting, she's like the fucking Scooby-Doo gang. She's like walking around like unmasking villains, like doing investigating shit. And she's like, fellows, get your ass here. And she like has purchased a fake beard and mustache, and she's like, put it on. And he's like, no. And then Mac and Ian are like, put it on, bitch. And then he puts it on, and then she's like, wow, he looks exactly like your guys' dad that I saw a picture of when we were at Kilmorgan. He's your half brother. And Fellows is like, no. And they're like, that explains why he hates us so much, because he was also has daddy issues just like us. That checks out, except he's poor.
Yeah.
So yeah, now they're all brothers. Fellows is very resistant, and they're like, no, like, sorry, you're now a member of the family. We've adopted you. Like, congratulations. Like, no, there's no escaping now.
Yeah.
And this whole time they're confronting Fellows, Ian just does not give a shit. He's just like smelling Beth's hair the entire time. He's like, I don't care what's going on. Like, we may have gained a half brother, but like Beth's hair smells good.
And then like Ian at one point, like Feller's like, I don't want to be part, like when he's like, I don't want to be part of your family, like you're all mad. Ian like looks up and he's like, we're all mad in our own way. Like I might be mad in my way, but like Hart is really into being a dick, and Mac is really into his horses, and Cameron or whatever, his art. Like we're all, and they all like stare at him, and then they're like, proof that we should always listen to the wisdom of Ian. And I feel like they're still very much like childizing, like infantilizing him.
They do infantilize him.
Like they're like, oh wow, like wow, so why? Like the way you would say to like a 4-year-old who says something like, we should all love each other,
But honestly, like Ian doesn't. I did recognize that like this read through. Like I feel like they are like all probably on the autism spectrum, like all of them.
That's what Ian's saying. I feel like,
yeah,
but
yeah. So anyway, they're all putzing back off to Scotland. Ian's like, we're gonna have a wedding, and he lists like details of like Beth's dream wedding that she like told him like all the way back at the beginning, and she's like, you remember that? And she's like, oh, never mind. Like,
I know
of
you
course
remember everything. Yeah. And Beth is like, do you have any idea how much I love you, Ian Mackenzie? And it's like, Ian couldn't see how that was relevant, so he didn't answer. Her hair smelled good.
Yeah. So, all right. So Beth is finally good enough to travel, and they're going back, and Hart apologizes at the train station, and they hug it out. We have another great, like a really nice example. Like, this book really has like a lot of good examples of like men just being like openly emotional with each other, and like it's nice. I like the physical affection element. And then Ian and Beth have train sex, and with each thrust, Ian is like, I love you, and it's a lot of I love yous just over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's nice.
And then we get the epilogue. Beth is pregnant. They have been married. Ian like makes a joke, and Beth is like, oh, is that a joke? And he's like, you've been teaching me to joke with your spicy tongue. I'm like, that's how the book ends. And it's great. Just really enjoyed it.
Catskill?
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for adding +2, but
maybe we should just disregard that, because like you seem to have a lot of trouble.
No, I just thought the other one was low. I was just you always bring it
with
up.
Like the math with the adding.
No, that's your problem. I was right. Ian, they have dogs. There are no cat characters. But I feel like Beth spent a long time kind of like being Mrs. Barrington's cat, you know?
Yeah.
Like pet cat.
Yeah.
Like Ian in a way, but I don't know if he's like cat-like or dog-like. It's hard to say. Beth is good at riding horses, despite never having like learned how to ride horses before. Which way does that?
The first time.
The first time, I know, but she gets good at it. Like she's able to become good at it.
After like training every day. Like I don't think she can't like gallop, but like she can like stay on the horse after like several weeks. I feel like Ian was almost dog-like, like a Doberman or something.
Yeah, like a pointer, like something with like a yeah. So I don't know. It felt cat-like though, because I don't know.
Felt like a cat would be involved in a murder plot.
Yeah.
All right. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah. 3.
Okay.
2, 1, 6.
4. Interesting.
I thought about saying 4, and then I said 6.
That is so separate. I don't what.
They're both even numbers. They're very similar vibes. I'll just tell you.
5.
Where can they find us, Allison?
At We Read It One Night on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, and on Twitter at We Read It Podcast. And you can email us, wereaditonenight@gmail.com. And you can also, if you so choose, leave us a message in the review that you're definitely going to leave if you haven't already after you finish listening to this episode. 5 stars or else. 5 stars or I'll take all your Ming porcelain bowls and you'll never get to see them ever again.
We skipped over the whole bowl boob thing in the beginning, which is very reminiscent of like Olive in yeah. Lyndon Mather, the guy who was like King Shane, remember? That's like ex-fiance. In the beginning, he's like, oh, don't these bowls like always just remind you of a woman's breast, Ian? And Ian's like, not really. Like maybe a very small boob could like fit in one, but that's as far as I'm willing to go.
And that is when Ian is like, yeah, I'm gonna break up his engagement. This man is a boob. This man is comparing bowls to boobs, and he is a boob, so he does not deserve to get married to anyone ever. I wonder if there's any like sexy things you can do with like, I guess like Ming bowls are like, you know, antiques, so like you probably shouldn't be like, I just feel like, you know, I'll think on it.
Please don't.
I'll think on it. I'll add that to my
to the Rolodex
scenario.
Yeah.
Add it to the Rolodex of like made up scenarios I go through before I go to sleep.
God. All right. Don't report back. All right.
What?
So don't report back on that.
I'm gonna wake you up tomorrow with like a whole scenario, a whole Ming bowl story that I'm gonna have written in a fever dream at 4 in the morning.
Oh God. All right.
Anyway,
on that note, Godspeed, comrades.